All right, welcome in. I'm Brian Edwards of MajorWager.com. We're talking SEC East today, and let's start with Georgia. 11-3 last year, disappointing end. Well, obviously the terrible fake punt call by Kirby in Atlanta that led to that L, and then just a total no-show, reminiscent of Alabama Utah about a decade ago. Just a no-show for Texas in the Sugar Bowl. 11-3, kind of a misleading number. Georgia was this close to being in the playoffs and a shot at a national championship that has eluded them since 1980. And Herschel Walker led Vince Dooley's bunch to victory in New Orleans in the title. 6 starters back on offense and defense, 12 total. Five Dimes season win total is 10.5 for Georgia. Over is minus 240. The under is plus 180. But I would imagine most books in Vegas will probably use 11 for that number. A scheduling note on the Pups. For those that aren't aware, I'm a Gator, so I don't always call them Bulldogs. Probably should on this video, but yeah, they're pups sometimes. Anywho, concerns for UGA. Depth and experience at wide receiver. Lost Ridley, Hardman, and the tight end. But DeAndre Swift is back. They lost Holyfield. He went pro a year early. Evander's probably spent all his money. Anywho, I've got Georgia marked with 9 wins, no losses, and 3 swing games. When I think a spread is going to be tight, and I'm basically just saying sort of a toss, not necessarily a toss-up game, but I'm just not willing to, confidently predict it in June. My 3 swing games for Georgia are against Florida in Jacksonville. They're a 4.5-point favorite at 5 Dimes, which recently released its games of the year. The other swing games being at Auburn and A&M at home the week after at Auburn. And scheduling note, 3 teams get 2 weeks to prepare for UGA when Georgia has to play the week before. Those 3 teams being South Carolina and Missouri, both of whom come between the hedges in Athens. Whereas Auburn gets 2 weeks and Georgia has to go there, and it's after playing Florida and Missouri in key division games. So that's a situational spot for Auburn that looks very, very good. Now, here we are in June, and we don't know who Auburn's quarterback is going to be. Bo Nix has never taken a collegiate snap. So, I'm never confident with any prediction of a team when I haven't seen their quarterback play before. And, watching some high school clips of Bo Nix is not going to do it for me. So, but just from a situational scheduling standpoint, Georgia will be at a disadvantage when they go to the Plains November 16th. Let's move over to Florida. Great first year for Dan Mullen. Great's a stretch. Really good first year. 10-3, did an outstanding job with Felipe Franks, who I thought was a lost cause. Franks, 24-6 TDI-INT ratio. Now, he kind of ran up those stats against Charleston, Southern, and Idaho, a couple of FCS teams. So a little misleading there. But if Franks proved anything to me, is that he's a tough physical runner. And he's got great size and athleticism. And I don't really trust him. But, pretty good so far. We'll see. Look, Florida's loaded at the skill positions, wide receiver, everybody back. Everybody. Well, it's up Ciante Lewis, the backup tight end. Jordan Scarlett went pro early, but LaMichael Pirine. Malik Davis has been dynamite when he hasn't been injured, but he's been injured early last year, mid-season, against LSU the year before, but he's been dynamite when he's on the field. And we had Damien Pierce emerge as a true freshman last year. So Florida 3 deep in the backfield, super deep at wide receiver. Van Jefferson, Grimes, Swain, Hammond, Kadarius Toney, Tyree Cleveland. Lost several players early. I mentioned Jordan Scarlett. Also lose Voshawn Joseph, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson early. But 5 starters back on offense, 8 on defense. And Florida also brings in an outstanding transfer in Jonathan Greenard from Louisville, who played for Grantham, the DC, when he was still under Bobby Petrino. And Greenard had 9.5 sacks in 2016 and 17 at Louisville. He got hurt in week 1 last year, but he's a grad transfer, immediately eligible. Florida minus 7.5 against Miami in week 0, August 24th in Orlando. I've got the Gators marked with 8 wins and 4 swing games, those being Georgia, at Missouri, which Florida is minus 3.5 at 5 dimes for that one, at LSU, where Florida is plus 3.5, and at South Carolina, and I do not believe I have seen a line for that. All right, let's move over to Missouri, and from the scheduling standpoint for the Tigers, they draw Ole Miss at home and Arkansas, right? At Arkansas. That's their annual crossover game, and that one is in Little Rock this year in the regular season finale. Tennessee gets 2 weeks to prepare for Mizzou, so a situational disadvantage there in the November 23rd showdown in Columbia, and Mizzou will play at Georgia and Florida at home in the weeks leading up to that. Kelly Bryant, the grad transfer from Clemson, he takes over for Drew Lock, who finished his career second all-time career passing yards in Missouri history. They bring back the running back Larry Roundtree, 11 touchdowns, 1,216 yards. Man, boy, when you're looking at that small font in the Phil Steele mag, does it clear up fast when you put on the readers? Okay, so they bring the outstanding tight end back, who many thought was going to go pro. Emmanuel Hall, they lose him, but they've got Jonathan Johnson coming back, and they're pretty good shape at wide receiver. The strength of this team is their offensive line. Defensively, they only gave up 25.5 points per game last year. They finished 8-5 straight up. 7 starters back on offense, 6 on defense. Look, Missouri, there is a chance that Missouri is, I don't see them being an underdog of more than 3 points in their first 8 games. They're at Wyoming, which they are minus 14.5 in that one to start. And then West Virginia at home. West Virginia just got gutted in the secondary with those transfers. Transition year for the Mountaineers. Then Southeast Missouri at home. South Carolina at home. Then 2 weeks to prepare for a home game against Troy. Then Ole Miss at home. Other than at Wyoming to start, Missouri doesn't have a road game again until October 19th when they go at Vandy and at Kentucky in back-to-back weeks. So it's plausible Missouri could start 8-0 and have 2 weeks to prepare for a game at Georgia. Don't look for that to happen, though. They'll trip up in one of those games at Vandy or at Kentucky. They could lose at home to South Carolina. Really, they could lose any of those home games except for Southeast Missouri. But then they close the season at Georgia, Florida at home, Tennessee at home, at Arkansas, and so there we go. That's Mizzou. Now let's talk about the Gamecocks. South Carolina coming off a very disappointing season. They had overachieved in Will Muschamp's first 2 seasons, and I thought they underachieved last year. Very high expectations. I picked them to win the East. Turnover margin was the difference. They were minus 5 in turnovers last year. They were plus 11 the year before when they went 9-4. So they finished 7-6 straight up and against the spread last year. 7 starters back on offense and defense, so 14 total. They lose Deebo Samuel, but Brian Mama Can't Spell Edwards is back, and so is Shi Smith. So you've got 2 really good receivers there. People like Phil Steele has South Carolina's running backs ranked 13th in his unit rankings for the SEC. I don't get people dogging on South Carolina's running backs. Let me go back to the readers again to read my stats off Phil Steele's mag. Rico Dowdle, 5.3 yards per carry last year. Mo Denson, 5.0 yards per carry last year. A.J. Turner, 6.4 yards per carry last year. Now, they moved A.J. Turner to DB in the spring. We'll see if that lasts. He has run for more than 1,300 yards in his career, and he's put on a lot of weight. He was really small as a freshman. I just said 6.4 yards per carry. I was kind of puzzled why he didn't get more touches last year. Rico Dowdle really pissed me off when he didn't catch that pass from Bentley, and then it hit his shoulder pad and up in the air in the pick six in the Georgia game. Look, South Carolina played a lot of young guys on defense. They had like 9 defensive players were out like in November, and several of them starters. They played a lot of young guys. That should help them this year, but the schedule is an absolute beast. They've got to play they do get them at home, but they do have to play Alabama and Clemson. They also have to go at Texas A&M when Texas A&M has 2 weeks to prepare. Vanderbilt also gets 2 weeks to prepare for South Carolina when South Carolina is at Tennessee the week before. Now, South Carolina gets 2 weeks to prepare for their game at Georgia and 2 weeks to prepare for Clemson, but Clemson also, that's a wash because Clemson also has an open date. South Carolina's minus 7.5 against North Carolina in Charlotte to start the year. They've got a tough week 4 game at Mizzou. I've got South Carolina marked as 5-4 with 3 swing games, those being versus Florida, at Tennessee, and at Missouri. Win total 6, shaded to the under minus 130. The over's minus 110. I skipped the win total on Missouri. It is 6.5, but the over's minus 350, which is ridiculous. I don't know why they don't move it to 7. Look for it to be 7 or maybe even 7.5 out in Vegas. Florida's win total was 9, under minus 120. Georgia's win total, I think I did mention that, 10.5 over minus 240. Okay, so we move on. Let's go to Knoxville, Tennessee. 5-7 last year, 4-8 the year before. What do we got there? 9-15. Woo! Tough times for the Vols. 10 starters back on offense, 6 on defense. They lose only 18. Letterman. I've got South Carolina. Oh, their win total is 7, under minus 140. The over is plus 110. A scheduling note, just like Georgia, Tennessee has 3 opponents that have 2 weeks to prepare for them off an open date when Tennessee does not have an open date prior. Those scheduling spots are UAB and Mississippi State and Kentucky. In fact, Mississippi State comes to Knoxville the week after Tennessee hosts Georgia, so Tennessee could be in a bit of a letdown scenario there. I forget if I mentioned it. 5 Dimes has Georgia minus 17.5 in that game that is at Tennessee. And South Carolina, Tennessee in Knoxville is a pick'em, and Tennessee can be beat up after that one. They have to play at Bama the previous week, and when Kentucky has 2 weeks of prep, Tennessee will be off hosting UAB, which also gets 2 weeks of prep for the Vols. Jared Garantano, he's back, 12-3 TDI-NT ratio last year. Did not make many mistakes, but didn't make many plays either. Less than 2,000 passing yards. They bring back all their receivers. Marquez Callaway is a very good receiver, as is Jawan Jennings. Not big numbers last year, but those guys have speed. They have, they weren't exactly playing in a very up-tempo offense or, not stretching the field much. I mean, now, Tennessee only averaged 22.8 points per game last year. So second year of Jeremy Pruitt's tenure, they're looking for two true freshmen to start at the tackle positions, with Darnell Wright being the number one offensive tackle in America coming in to Knoxville. Wait, let's see here. Yeah, 4-4 is what I marked Tennessee with 4 swing games. The 4 swing games being versus South Carolina and Mississippi State, and at Vandy and at Kentucky. Obviously, Vandy has owned the Vols of late. Let's get to Kentucky off the biggest season in decades, 10-3 for the Cats in Mark Stoops' 6th season at the helm. However, they lose a lot. Only 6 starters back on offense, 4 on defense. But I see 6 wins for Kentucky. I see 4 L's and 2 swing games. Their over-under win total is 6. It is over -165. The under is +125. Those 2 swing games being Tennessee at home, and they have 2 weeks to prepare, like I noted, and the other one being at Vanderbilt, which is the week after the Tennessee game. But the only games I have marked as L's for Kentucky are Florida, where they're 7.5-point home underdog at 5 dimes, and L's also at Mississippi State, at South Carolina, and at Georgia. But I've got W's the rest of the way, and they get Arkansas at home as one of the crossover games from the West, so that's good. And Louisville, they'll be improved with Satterfield, but boy, was it a struggle, and wasn't that a joy to watch Bobby Petrino be miserable and take a pink slip last year. All right, let's go to Vandy. You know what's to like about the Commodores? They have 3 absolute studs. Well, Collegiate Lipscomb and Jared Pinkney, the tight end, they returned to school, and Keyshawn Vaughn, the running back. And apologies to Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin. Apologies to DeAndre Swift at Georgia, and a slew of others. I'll take Keyshawn Vaughn over any running back in the country. I will. 7.9 yards per carry behind a Vanderbilt offensive line. And he had 13 catches for 170 yards, 2 touchdowns. He ran for 1,244 yards, 12 touchdowns. But remember, he got hurt early in the second quarter against Florida when Vandy had a 21-3 lead. They got 2 field goals the rest of the game. And he didn't play at Kentucky the next week. And I feel like he missed some time in another game. Point being, Keyshawn Vaughn's numbers would have been even better. He was terrific, and they were very fortunate he didn't go pro. Same with Lipscomb and Pinkney. I mean, those 3 guys are going to be 10 years in the NFL apiece. And look, Kyle Shermer is gone. Quarterback Vandy's had since Jay Cutler. But they've got the transfer, Riley Neal, coming in from Ball State. He's got 32 career starts. And pardon me as I check my notes, my readers. Getting old man syndrome here. 46-25 TD-INT ratio at Ball State. 7,393 career passing yards. But here's the thing. When you're a Vandy quarterback, and look, they had a hell of an offense last year, and Shermer's not very mobile. But Neal is very mobile. In fact, 1,363 career rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. So he can move, and I think Vandy's going to be very good offensively. They lost some guys on the O-line, but I think Vandy's got a really good chance to go bowling again, as the win total points out. It is only 5, but it's shaded to the over -150. And I've got Vandy marked 3-4 with 5 swing games. I've got them losing to Georgia at home in the opener. I don't know why that game is off the board. Every week 1 game is up, and for some reason that game is off the board. There's no injury notation on my live odds feed, and there are injury notations with a number of other games. at least a dozen or more. I have no idea why that game is off the board. At Purdue in week 2, look, Purdue lost a lot. They bring back Rondale Moore, but Purdue lost a bunch. That is definitely a game Vandy can win. I would think they'll probably be a short underdog. They get 2 weeks to prepare for LSU at home, but LSU from out of the West, and then you got to go at Ole Miss, your other game from the West, which they'll take that all day. That's their annual game against the SEC West, by the way. They get 2 weeks to prepare for at South Carolina. So anyway, the L's I had marked, like I said, Georgia and LSU, at South Carolina, at Florida. I mean, South Carolina is not a guaranteed L, though. I mean, look, much stranger things have happened. They could win that game. Again, they have 2 weeks to prepare. So anyway, those are the 4 L's I marked. And again, they could possibly win at South Carolina. The W's I have marked are Northern Illinois at home, UNLV at home, and East Tennessee State at home. I've got the swing games for Vandy as at Tennessee, Kentucky at home, Missouri at home, at Ole Miss, and at Purdue. Now, they'll probably be an underdog in all those games. Well, maybe not at home against Kentucky. It'll just depend on how the season is playing out. But look, Vandy can go bowling this year. There's no doubt. And they have 3 of the best players in the SEC. When you talk about Lipscomb, when you talk about Vaughn, and you talk about Pinckney. 3 of the best, very best players in the SEC. It's rare that Vandy can say they have that and legitimately say that. But they do. They do this year. All right, I'm Brian Edwards of MajorWager.com. There is your early SEC East preview. We got the SEC West coming up the next couple days. Thanks for joining us. Over now.